We're studying the path of soul now with the three last cards of the tarot. The sun is what we're looking at today, and then there's judgment and the world. And these three represent the zenith of achievement of a life well lived. Path of soul. What we have to learn is that we change our mode of perception from being a self with a soul to being a soul with a self. This self-identification as soul is primary, and it frees us from worldly things and attachment to things which are transitory and ephemeral. They have no depth of meaning in the long term. And as we move towards the eventual passing on to the next life, we become more circumspect about the meaning of this worldly existence. And we come to understand that because it is transitory, its meaning fades as we get older, as we get closer to death. Our life achievements that we cannot carry forward will disappear. And as they become closer and closer to lost in history, we start to focus on that which is eternal, that which cannot die. And our access to that is by this process of self-identification as soul. Now, the soul is not encased in clay or in time. So the soul isn't physical and does not suffer the entropy of physicality. And we have to think about what that means. The fact that we, in our physical bodies, die off changes everything. Changes everything that we think and everything that we feel and everything that we do. It's kind of seriously centering around the fact that we die. Whereas the soul doesn't have that. It's got a totally different agenda because it doesn't die. It doesn't know time either. It lives in the present moment. And this perhaps is one of the sort of deepest Sufi mysteries describing the sun, is that it has no yesterdays. Yesterday does not exist for the sun. It is now what it always has been. Actually what it always will be, except in terms of physics and those people that study the fact that billions of years from now the sun will theoretically die. Well, it will die, but it's not part of our reality. It's just a concept. We can't recognize that as an experience that we will have. So the sun doesn't change. It's the same today as it was yesterday, and it will be tomorrow. And that whole thing of not having yesterdays, what if we didn't? What if we didn't have any investment in our personal history and our achievements and our family upbringings and all the joys and problems that go with that, and our nation statehood and all these things that define who we are? What if they were all taken from us and we have no yesterday? And this is the mystery of the sun. And it's the path of soul. So self-identification of soul is the freedom that we can claim in life. This is not some airy-fairy mystery that 1 in a million people can attend to. This is something that we can all do. We can identify self as soul and put ourselves in a different position of consciousness where we're looking down on ourselves almost. We see that we've got a personality interacting with the world and a body dying off and needing to be taken care of. We can notice that that is the case, but we don't have to diminish ourselves by being caught up in that. We can detach ourselves from all of that when we enter soul consciousness. So this is the mystery we're discussing with this tarot card. How to do that. How to move yourself into soul consciousness, we have to assume that we've gone through all of the lessons and the life experiences and the challenges and the growthful developments, qualities and realizations that we've been through, all the cards, until we get to here and now. And the last one, the moon, let us know that we are a reflection of God. We're reflecting God to itself. Equally, life is reflecting us to ourselves. That's the moon's mystery. And we move on now to the sun's mystery, whose purpose is to radiate. That's what it does. It just radiates warmth and light. And we can do that. We can know that our fundament of life, the foundation upon which we rest, is soul consciousness. And the soul is equivalent to the sun. It is creative. It gives the warmth of life through its light. And that's the soul's relationship with the physical body and the ego, the personality, that which normally we call I. There's this radiance towards the earthly aspect of soul coming from the soul, because that's all the soul can do. The soul is like the sun. It can only radiate love and warmth and light. That's its essence. So even though we can't, as people, receive this without some imperfection, that doesn't stop it from shining. And as we identify ourselves as the source of that radiant shining, and we live that life, we become immersed in the understanding that there is only now. And we've all studied the books. We've all read the books about now is the only time, be here now, and now is it. That's spiritual consciousness. And as a concept, it is something that we think about, talk about, and so on. But do we actually affirm it as a choice of how to live? We forget our history. We don't get caught up, therefore, in blame or guilt or expectation. We notice what is now and respond spontaneously and expect other people to do that, and to live in that sort of sense that this particular moment is all and everything. Now, to live that way, it requires retraining the way we think. We have to recalibrate our thought processes and all that follows, the feelings that we have as a result of that and what we do as a result of that. And I've spoken before on the topic that's answering this point within Sufism, which is known by the phrase Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, which is perhaps the word that I've used in my life most frequently. I say it very often throughout the day. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Bismillah, I begin in the name of God. Ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, who is compassion and mercy. So constant reaffirmation that I am in the name of God, beginning again. I begin again. I serve God again. I begin again. This moment is another opportunity to be one with the name of God. And the best service that you can actually offer in the name of God is to receive the service of God to yourself. Now that's food for thought, isn't it? Freedom is central to the sun's beingness. You don't challenge the sun. The sun is what it is, and there's no getting away from that. It does what it does, and you can't stop it. Freedom. And we have that within us. because we have the gift of free will. Now, some people might argue the point, and they're arguing against being free. Well, they can do that, but I never would. I would only ever affirm freedom, and I do affirm free will. It's just self-evident to me. It's intuitively obvious. That's why we all feel this sense of the right to be free, and the offence against our essence nature if somebody tries to stop us doing what we choose to do. We have that inner certainty of freedom, and I've discussed this before. It's not something you have to explain or rationalise or persuade people. Everyone knows that they want to be free. So that's the essence nature of the soul speaking through us. And therefore that determines the certainty that there exists free will. If there is no free will, then there is no freedom. And we affirm freedom. So we know there is free will. And since there is free will, we are not subject to any authority at all. We might be subject to power. We might not have the power to go against someone who is trying to restrict us. But we know for a fact that that power is not God. If God gave us free will, and who else could, then it can't be taken away again. It's not a temporary thing to see how we got on with it. It's a gift. There you go. Do the best you can. So we know that we're never going to be stopped by God in enacting our free will. Now, necessarily, therefore, this means that God is serving us. And I speak with a smile because there are various places in the world right now that would get me locked up, if not hung up. And throughout history, I wouldn't have been able to say that without serious implications that would threaten my well-being. But that's how I see it. That if there is free will, then God must be serving us. In other words, yeah, that's what you want. There it is. Is that what you want? There it is. It's life responding to our will. That's what it means. And instead of just saying that this that I see is a reflection of me, you could see it a little bit differently. You could say, life, what I see, is God's response in serving my choice. Why would God not want to serve us in all humility? I don't know of a better feeling than humility. I don't know where humility could come from if it's not the essence of God. So why are we assuming that we have to serve God and that's God's will that we should serve the autocratic tyrant? It just doesn't make any sense. The essence feeling, the most beautiful access we have to God and to know what God is only found in humility. Surely. And this is what the unity point is in the Trinity teachings. It's the path of humility. And you can't really decide to behave as if you're humble and hope that will work. There's some mystery here, which is not a choice of behavior or a series of decisions. It's a mystical thing. It's a secret beyond a decision of will. We cannot operate humility using free will. There's something else to find. And I'm not suggesting that I know what that is or I could teach it. I'm suggesting that we can follow the trinity of freedom, evolution, and creativity and wait, see what happens, And I rather assume that the gift, when we get that right, will be a greater, sweeter taste of God. And that is humility, surely. That's my take on it anyway. So, what our job is to be the agency through which God's humility can make itself known in the world. And we notice that is happening when we are comfortable enough, relaxed enough, confident enough, in the right place at the right time, frequently enough, only to practice present-centered consciousness. I am here now, and I don't want to be anywhere else. This is the only place I want to be right now, and I don't want to think about yesterday or tomorrow, even a moment ago or a moment soon. I'm just totally and utterly content with where I am right now and what I'm doing right now. And that's it. That's Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. And that is only really something that I've ever touched the experience of once, maybe once or twice, when a sense of humility overtook me. I may have said this before, but I remember it. I was walking along the streets of Riga, and I saw a beggar alone. She wasn't with the bunch of beggars near the church, which seemed more like a gang from the mafia than a bunch of humble beggars. But this woman I saw on the street, she was quietly sitting there with her paper cup. It seemed to me that she was intoning something. Her lips were moving as though in prayer. And I gave her a small coin, and we exchanged a glance. And in that moment, I just knew what humility felt like. It was such a blessing. And I think the radiance of the sun was pouring out of that beggar woman. And that's what I got. In the face of the sun, if we really understand what the sun is, it's the difference between not only a rainy day and a sunny day, a grim, depressing, boring, I have to go to work kind of experience, or, oh, let's go out to play kind of thing, which is very often what happens when there's a sunny day, but that's not the sun. That's an absence of cloud. That's quite a different thing. The sun is the source of our life. We would die immediately the sun died. And even if there was a slight change in its mode of operation, we would die. And so our relationship with the sun really ought to be one of humility. And yet it generates in us this feeling of celebration. Isn't that paradox? You don't think of celebrating humility, do you? And here we have the secret that the sun's true mystery is transcendence. It is representing the state of our being, which is transcendent. It is the soul. It is not encased in the body. It's not lost in thought or feeling or opinion or anything that diminishes its glory. And it's not as proud and ruling the sky as we impute. We give it that role, that the sun is the kingdom of the king of the cosmos and so on. Well, no, the sun is humble. And when we tune in to the real depth of the mystery of the sun, we find humility. And then when we are in that state of humility, like the beggar in Riga, there's this radiance of light. Not the harsh light that can be captured by a camera, but the sweet light that we don't capture, we surrender to in meditation. More in dance, or more perhaps than meditation, that when we're chanting the name of God, or more perhaps when we're taking care of the vulnerability of a baby, when we're an old person, when we're absolutely in service of something innocent and beautiful, where there's no sense of ego at play. That's when we experience this quality, the exaltation of self in non-self. That is meant to be a paradox. Life is meant to be a paradox. We're not meant to understand life. Life is meant to be mysterious. That, so that we can make up our model of reality. If we were told this is true and we knew it was, and so on, by people that actually knew themselves, we would not have the level of creativity required to make it up. The fact that we are not given the truth about the meaning of life is the sweetest of gifts. That enables our creativity to reach its exaltation. The fact that we are imprisoned by tyrants, the greatest of which is the death of the physical body, that tyranny is the greatest of gifts, because it is what makes freedom reach out for its exaltation. Without tyranny, we wouldn't know freedom. How could we? Without that which limits our proper evolution to become all that we could be, in other words, problems and obstacles and authorities and self-doubt and all these things that stop us from growing to be who we are, without those challenges, the stress of life, we couldn't grow. We wouldn't evolve. We need friction to grow. So these things that we tend to speak of in negative terms, that's what gives us our possibility of developing freedom, evolution, creativity. It's the troubles in our life that seem to stop that, that enable that. That's the paradox. And I've spoken before of my grandfather, who was a humble man, and he had a humble intelligence. It was based in knowing what the weather was going to do 5 hours' time, because he had to go out in his boat, and he had to know whether it was going to be a terrible storm within that period of time, so he could read the weather, and he could read men as well, and people, and he knew how to make money, even though he was a very humble ship's carpenter. He had nous, but he had no what's the word for it? He had no intellectual intelligence. He had he was streetwise, as it were, in his simple way. And he was a humble man, and he knew God. Absolutely. He would never speak of it, but he knew God. And he knew it in the sunrise and in the weather predicting, and he just knew how to live. And he knew God because of that. Humility could be said to be worth it for its own sake, and of course that's true. And soul consciousness gives us the access to the secret of being rather than doing. We spend our lives doing stuff and trying to move forward in the world, and yet the real secret is to find a way to be happy and joyful with no stimulus, no company, whether it's raining or sunny, whether you're busy or not. Just be who you are. That's the secret of happiness. And this is reached through humility. However, it isn't the end. When you can touch those states of self-identification as soul, then there are secrets revealed, because the soul knows more than we could ever know if we're lost in ego. So when you actually touch soul consciousness, then you get to see a model of the nature of reality, which is a different model from what we're taught and what we experience. And on that higher plane of consciousness, you notice that there are versions of expression of the soul in different space-time coordinates. So James is one aspect of the soul, and there are other aspects of that soul in different places and times. And as I was coming closer and closer to a state of realization, I got to have familiarity with my soul siblings, as I call them, those of us who are still incarnated, but are aware of ourselves as aspects of a central being, a soul. And at first I saw the soul as different from me, but then I started to affirm myself as soul acting through James relatively recently. And I realized that if I could do that, then I could also affirm myself as soul acting through my other soul siblings. And I became conversant with their wisdom and their dreams and their skills. And so I became able to do things that I wasn't able to do before. And I knew things that I didn't know before. And I could write stories and explanations that I had no idea about before I started to write them. And I've improved in my musicality and my ability to dance unreservedly when I started to do this. And so this is the mystery that we really need to get if we want to identify the self as a soul. We have to affirm that we are more than one person, actually. However strange this sounds. I start multitasking on the soul level. So it's not as though when you act as one of your soul siblings, you can see the results in this world unreservedly, obviously. It's not obvious, but it's there. You can see the impact upon this world as you start to act as if you were one of the soul siblings. And moving in this direction, you get to a point where you can simultaneously do that. You know that all of your decisions and your words and your feelings are resonant on various planes, and you have mastery over different planes of being. I wonder if some of you might have seen the movie called Cloud Atlas. This is so well made. That movie explains this principle visually, dramatically. It's such a clever way. I was so excited when I saw it. It's like, oh yeah, somebody else gets it. So if you get a chance to see Cloud Atlas, this will explain what I'm talking about much more clearly. So we're moving now into the path of soul. It's a path. A path is a trajectory of sorts. It's also kind of a structured sense of direction. So we're saying that the path of soul exists. The soul has a path. In other words, the soul has a destination. It is here, it wants to be there. And this seems a paradox when compared to the idea of living here and now, that there is no need to move away. And we're saying if the soul is rather like the sun, why would it have a path or a direction? And its path is simply greater and greater and greater self-realization. Its path is to do with development of that which is yet imperfect within it. So any quality can be taken to the exaltation of itself. Love, harmony, beauty, compassion, patience, any quality is only ever not quite as good as it could be. And this is because there is a greater mystery, a greater spiritual secret in the verb rather than the noun. Perfecting is better than perfect. Perfecting is dynamic, it's ever-changing. Perfect is dead, it's not moving. So that state of being complete doesn't actually exist. There is no stasis in life. Life denies the possibility of a stationary condition for any duration. If you're not evolving, then you're suffering entropy, you're dying off. And this applies to everything alive. So ask yourself, do you think God is alive? I do. So I don't think of God as perfect and therefore subject to entropy. I think of God as perfecting and therefore growing all the time, getting more and more and more so by developing greater finesse of qualities. And that process of God's perfecting is enacting itself through us as we identify self as soul and develop more and more and more a sense of the wonder of God through freedom, evolution, and creativity. Then we're in alignment. We're doing what we should be doing. Whenever anybody asks me, who am I and what I should be doing, well, you're a soul and you should be celebrating beingness in the name of God, is the real answer I ought to be giving. And the word for that is Bismillah, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim in Sufism. So find your own word if you don't like that one, but say it often so that you remember yourself as a soul here and now throughout all of the realms, way beyond the earth realm. We're starting to move into this cosmic consciousness now, where we don't think of ourselves as limited at all. We're into that realm of, wow, how big it all is, and how big we are, and how magnificent we actually are as beings of light, equal to the archangels. And Archangel Michael is deeply associated with this solar energy. We could say they're equivalents. And in Sufism, Rumi's teacher, Shams of Tabriz, the son of Tabriz, was exactly this principle. A wild dervish that lived completely out of civilized society. And it might be more convenient for you to kind of move away from civilization if you want to realize the mystery of the sun. Is that kind of thing. It burns people. As soon as you get into this consciousness, you're too intense for most people. So you might be doing them a favor by living alone more.